Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I really feel like the Lord wants us all to be free from fear, because He's called us each to walk in kingdom power, and we can't do that if we're hindered by fear. And so I am grateful for the opportunity to share what the Lord has been doing in my life. And as I do that, I wanted to begin with a portion of my testimony. And although there are other areas of fear that I have walked in, this is probably one of the most intense stories. And so I will share it with you tonight. I was lying on a metal table with no cushion. My feet and legs were duct taped together, and my arms were duct taped to my sides. Then a blanket was draped over me. And the table that I was lying on began to move toward the large CT scanning machine, and it whirred very, very loudly. It was very intimidating, and inch by inch, I was moved into the tunnel of this CAT scan machine. The machine was taking millimeter-sliced pictures of my body from the bottom of my feet to the top of my head. It took 45 minutes. An hour before that, they had injected me with radioactive sugar, because sugar feeds cancer. And if there was any cancer in my body, the radioactive sugar would show up there. Melanoma goes to the brain, the lungs, the bones, and the stomach. And if they found it, I would have weeks or months to live. And there is no cure outside of Jesus. And this was the culmination of my summer's journey. After 2 surgeries to remove the melanoma from my foot and the lymph nodes from my leg, it was now to be decided if I was going to live or die. I was 51. I didn't want to die. Fear is one of the most debilitating of all emotions. It's overpowering. It steals your energy. It steals your joy. It steals your peace. It is absolutely overwhelming. You can't laugh at a joke when you're afraid. You can't enjoy a television show when you're afraid. It is all-consuming, and you are on hyper alert. You hear every voice, every sound, every breath, every heartbeat. What do you do when you're afraid? You run. What do you do when you see a monster? You run. What do you do when you are in a parking lot and you're being approached by a stranger? You run. When you're afraid, you run. But what if there's nowhere to run? What if when you run, the danger runs with you? And looking over your shoulder does you no good, because the fear is with you. It's inside of you. It's overwhelming. It's there all the time. It's there when you go to sleep at night. You're exhausted and you just fall asleep with fear. It's there when you wake up the next day. It is your constant companion. We all experience fear at different levels. I might call it fear, you might call it terror or torment. You might call it panic or anxiety. You might call it shock. You might call it dread or a phobia. We all have different names for it, and we all have different areas that we're afraid of. You might be afraid of the dark. You might be afraid for your job. You might be afraid for your kids or your parents. You might be afraid for the economy. Some people are just afraid, and they have no idea where that fear comes from. But it doesn't matter what you call it, and it doesn't matter what the cause is. I want to tell you that fear is our enemy. Fear is our enemy, and we were not meant to live with this kind of fear. There is definitely a way to defeat it. It does not have to be your constant companion. You can face it and you can defeat it. So what is fear? Fear is one of those emotions that in one way can be very good for you. It's an emotion that tells you to get away when you're in danger. And God made us, and He said that everything that He made was good. And He put that fight or flight mechanism inside of us so that we could react to dangerous situations by getting away. And some situations are immediately dangerous. Maybe it's a teenager in a car with a drunk driver, or an employee in a parking garage when a stranger's approaching. See, the danger is right then, right there, and fear gives you the motivation to leave, to avoid danger. But for the most part, that's a very small portion of the fear that we experience on an everyday basis. Fear, for the most part, is a very negative experience with very negative consequences. Fear is debilitating. And this portion of fear that God created that allows us to be motivated to move away from danger is very small in comparison to the amount of fear that we carry. And I want to tell you that this fear that we carry on a regular basis is not from God. Our bodies were not intended to keep this kind of fear and this intensity of fear for a long period of time. See, fear alone can eventually kill you. It affects your body in very harmful ways. It contributes to chronic illnesses and to diseases and to mental illness. We have nightmares if we can sleep at all. Maybe we eat too much or we don't eat enough because of fear, and we are in desperate need of medication to at least help us to get through the day. This kind of fear, this is not from God. It's not natural. It's not normal. This fear is your enemy. And we need to learn how to face it and how to defeat it. So let's look at what causes fear. What is the root? The root of fear is a belief system. If you can imagine a plant, there should be a picture up here. Okay, there's a tree. So you can imagine a tree, okay? And the root of the tree supports the tree. And the root then gets nutrients from the ground in order to feed the rest of the tree. So if you can imagine in your mind that fear is the tree, and the root is the belief system. Now, the belief system for fear is the feeling or the belief that I am not safe. And there are a lot of things that we use, or a lot of things that happen in our lives that support this belief, that actually keep fear firmly entrenched in your life and actually can cause it to grow. Just like the root pulls nutrients from the ground, our belief system looks for things to validate it so that fear can grow and be supported. So let's look at some of those things. First of all, childhood traumas. There are a lot of people who have experienced traumatic events in their childhood that affected them so deeply that although the danger is long past, they are still afraid today. They were attacked by a dog years ago, and today they're still afraid. But now, they're afraid of all dogs. They were molested by an uncle years ago, and today they're still afraid. But now, they're afraid of all men. They were in a car accident years ago, and today they're still afraid. Only now, they're afraid to drive. See, the traumatic experiences that we had in childhood, they were not safe, and we still feel the effects of it. Some of us grew up in alcoholic homes. Some of us were sexually or physically abused. Some of us were bullied and humiliated. But there are other things that we've experienced too. that reinforce fear in our lives. See, as adults, we have traumatic experiences as well. Maybe we were physically or emotionally abused in marriage. Maybe we lost a child or a parent. Or we were raped. Or we were robbed at gunpoint or rejected by a spouse. See, all of these things can reinforce the belief that we are not safe. And there's no protection for us in this world. Now, another thing that can reinforce fear in our lives that we don't often think about is sin. See, we participate in things that we know are wrong. We might say things that we know are wrong, or we behave in a certain way, but deep in our hearts, we know it's wrong. And it's that dichotomy of belief. It's that feeling that I know what I'm doing is wrong, and it causes a great unsettling and a lot of anxiety. I was treating a woman in the medical clinic for anxiety because, as she put it, I am the other woman. And you see, she was having an affair with a married man. And she knew in her heart that it was wrong. But she wouldn't change her behavior. And because her behavior and what she really believed on the inside were at such odds, it caused great fear and anxiety in her life to the point where she needed to medicate it. See, when we are doing things that we know we shouldn't do, it causes fear and anxiety, and it lingers in our lives over a long period of time. And it reinforces this belief system that I am not safe. So it keeps fear firmly entrenched in our lives. So what else feeds fear? Do you know sometimes we actually seek out fear? We look for the bad news in the newspaper or the online sites or Facebook accounts or Twitter accounts. We are obsessed about reading about the evil things that happen in our world. We have to do it. See, fear produces adrenaline. And adrenaline gives the body a sense of heightened awareness, alertness, heightened activity. It makes our muscles tense up. It makes us stronger. It makes us more alert. And it produces this adrenaline. And this adrenaline rush can get addictive. This is why people go to horror flicks, and they want to see horror flicks. This is why people engage in dangerous activities. They might jump out of airplanes, or they might want to be challenged to see if they can shoplift and get away with it. See, fear produces this adrenaline, and over a period of time, then we need more adrenaline in order to have that same adrenaline buzz. So sometimes we actually seek out fear without realizing that this is having a long-term impact in our lives, that it's actually producing fear and anxiety in our lives. Now, for other people, fear is present all the time, and they don't even know how it started. They don't know where it came from. They live in a safe home. They have a solid job. They have friendships. They are fairly healthy, but every waking moment is consumed by fear and anxiety, and they don't know what happened. They don't know where it started. And maybe their parents taught them that nothing is sure in life, and they approached every single situation with a little bit of fear and anxiety, and they actually learned to be anxious. They actually learned to be fearful. Sometimes we just don't know how to connect the dots. Sometimes we don't understand what it is that is actually causing fear and anxiety in our lives. But a lot of times we don't even know that we are living in fear. Sometimes we think we don't need fear. We have fear. Sometimes we think we don't have any fear, and we don't even need to deal with it at all. we think that we have it all together. We use all kinds of coping mechanisms to hide that fear because fear is uncomfortable. Fear makes us feel vulnerable, and we don't want anyone to know that fear is there. Maybe we're driven and successful, and we speak with confidence. We always have to show our best side because God forbid that someone might see the chip in my armor. Or maybe we're perfectionists. We have to do everything with excellence. No one can see us fail. Maybe we're lazy and unmotivated because we know if we start something, we might not finish it, and we're afraid that we might not succeed anyway. Maybe we're workaholics or alcoholics or TV-holics or Facebook-holics, that any kind of addictions usually cover up fear and pain. Well, let's look at what God says about fear. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. And what this verse is saying is that if we have fear, we don't have power, we don't have love, and we don't have a sound mind. That if we have power, love, and a sound mind, we're not operating out of fear. But if there's fear, we don't have power, we don't have love, and we don't have a sound mind. And I think that we need to take a good look at our lives and see what areas of our lives are lacking. First of all, do we have power? What is power but influence? Power is influencing people around you. Do you have power and influence in your home? Is your voice heard and your presence known in your home? Do you have that kind of influence? What about your workplace or your ministry? Because if these things aren't present, then more than likely, there's a root of fear somewhere in there. Well, what about love? This is about healthy relationships. And some people don't have healthy relationships. They have conflict in every relationship. They have conflict in relationships with their spouse, with their children, with their parents, with their friends. And if all of your relationships are difficult and you don't have healthy love relationships, then more than likely, fear is present somewhere. And how about a sound mind? A sound mind is being mentally and emotionally stable. It's being able to think and process things very clearly. It's being able to make a decision. Some people can't even make a decision. They're filled with so much fear that they don't know if they should pick red or blue. They don't know if they should go right or left. They have a very hard time making decisions. And if they can't make a decision, chances are there's a root of fear somewhere. Some people can make decisions, but they make rash decisions based on knee-jerk emotional reactions. And if that's the case, there's also a root of fear. See, we can see that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but he has given us power, which is influence, love, which is healthy relationships, and a sound mind, which is mental and emotional stability. But if we have those things in our lives, we have to look at the fact that we have fear in our lives. Fear is operating in our lives. So God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. The second thing I want to point out here is that fear did not come from God. God did not give you a spirit of fear. And there's only one source, one other source. If it didn't come from God, it came from Satan. So this fear comes from Satan. He is the enemy of God. And because you are created in the image of God, he is your enemy as well. And the enemy is going to make absolutely sure that he strips you of all power and influence in your life by putting fear there. He's going to make sure that there are no healthy love relationships in your life. So he's going to make sure fear is there. The enemy is going to make sure that there is no mental and emotional stability in your life. So he's going to put fear there. See, we have to understand that fear does not come from God. It does come from the enemy. And the last thing that I want to emphasize with this passage is it says God has not given us a spirit of fear. Fear can be a spirit. See, it's not just this general emotional atmosphere thing. It's a spirit. And a spirit has personality and purpose. And its purpose is for your misery and your destruction. And we have to stop accepting fear like it's a part of us and start seeing fear for what it really is, a foreign invader. And that is where we are going to have victory, when we begin to see fear for what it really is and stop embracing it like it's a part of who we are. We feel like we have to live with fear. We've had it for so long. It's in us, it's around us, it becomes part of us, it's how we move, it's how we roll. And we get the feeling that we have to deal with fear just like we have to deal with a difficult relative. We say, oh, well, I don't like it, but I guess I just have to accept it. Or maybe we feel like it really is a part of us. And we say, oh, well, it's really just a chemical imbalance. I guess I just have to medicate it. But we need to see fear for what fear really is. See, this is where your victory lies, when you get a different perspective about what fear is. See, fear is not your friend. Fear is not part of your personality. Fear is not in your DNA. Fear is not something that you need to embrace. Fear is not something that you need to tolerate, and it's not something that you need to control. It's something that you need to face and defeat. It does not need to be a part of your life. You do not need to accept fear. And this is where you can begin the road to victory and having freedom from fear. So you have two choices. You can either just continue to accept fear and control it and to tolerate it and to medicate it and move on in the same direction that you've always gone. Or you can choose to see fear differently, that fear is your enemy, and learn how to take a stand against it and defeat it so that it is no longer a part of your life. Romans 12:2 says, do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. The Lord is telling us in this verse that we do not need to be conformed to the pattern of the world. And what is the pattern of the world? The pattern of the world is to look at fear as though it is a part of us, as though it is a part of our personality. That's the pattern of the world. And the Lord is saying, no longer conform to the pattern of the world. This is where your transformation comes, is by renewing your mind. This is where you have to start. Isaiah 26:3 says, you will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is focused on you because he trusts in you. See, a lot of us long for peace. We want peace. We want freedom from fear. And these scriptures tell us that fear comes from God, and therefore peace comes from God, and therefore we can grab a hold of it. And we don't need to accept fear any longer. We can grab a hold of it. How? By keeping our mind focused on the Lord and trusting in him. This is where we have to begin. This is the renewing of the mind. This is the retraining. This is where your victory comes in. Now, it's not easy. We've been keeping fear in our lives for so long. We've just accepted it for so long. And to think that we could just say some magic words and sprinkle some magic words and maybe sprinkle the name of Jesus over it and bam, it's gone, poof, like a little genie. But it doesn't work that way. So you have to retrain, and retraining is not that easy to do. How bad do you want it? you've got to want it. I'm going to tell you one thing that helped me. The day after I was diagnosed with melanoma, Dawn Mull came to my house. I had called her, and she came over. And before she came over, she said God spoke to her and told her to write this down. And she wrote down God's words to me. And I saved it. I put it on my wall, and I read it every day. And I want to read a portion of what she wrote. And this is from God to me. Many will speak, but listen to me. Listen to my voice. I am your strength and your fortress. I am your deliverer. Fear not, trust. Fear not, trust in me. See, this is what the Lord was saying to me. I'm going to speak to you. There's a lot of voices that you're going to hear, but pay attention to my voice. And there's something that I did right. I didn't go on the internet. I didn't go on the internet and look up melanoma and see what my chances of surviving were. See, from my nursing background, my medical background, I already had a pretty good idea what I was up against. And from what I was hearing from the doctors, what I was beginning to hear from the doctors, I had heard enough. And so one of the things that I decided right away was I was going to listen to the voice of God. And I was not going to listen to other voices that were speaking. And so what I did was I took Dawn's advice, or God's advice through Dawn, to listen to the voice of God. And I went through scriptures, and I found scriptures that were life-giving. And I wrote them on paper plates. And I put them around the condo where I was staying this summer. And I want to read some of them to you. Psalm 118:17. I will not die, but live, and will proclaim what the Lord has done. And I spoke this over myself. Psalm 121:7. The Lord will keep you, Robin, from all harm. He will watch over your life. Robin, Jesus Messiah heals you. And you know, I want you to know that when I first started going through this, to say that I was afraid was an understatement. I was terrified. I couldn't think straight. The fear was overwhelming. I wasn't sure if I was going to die from melanoma or if I was going to die from the fear. It was that absolutely overwhelming to me. And in my head, the words that were being spoken to me was words from my medical training. There's no hope for you. And words from my own mind, you're going to die from this. And words from the enemy, there's no hope, not even in Jesus. There's no hope. And this is what I did. No, I will not listen to any other voices but the voice of God. See, God has not given Robin a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. The mind governed by the flesh is death, but the mind governed by the Spirit is life and peace. So do not fear, Robin, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. And this one is one of my favorites. Bread, butter, cheese, laundry detergent, yogurt, sunscreen. See, this was my grocery list. And I was cleaning up one day, and I was getting ready to throw it out, cleaning up on crutches, getting ready to throw this out, and Len grabbed it, and he said, do not throw this away. Because this is God's reminder to you that there is another side. And when you get done with this, you're going to return home to your family, and you're going to be able to go back to the things that you did before. You're going to go shopping, and you're going to buy bread and butter and cheese and laundry detergent and sunscreen. And sometimes when I was afraid, I would say, Len, Speak a scripture verse over me. I need it. And he would say, bread, butter, cheese, laundry detergent. I had memorized Psalm 91 because it is a promise of God for me for deliverance from cancer, from the deadly pestilence, from the snare of the trapper. And from verse 1 all the way through, I memorized it. And when I was inside that CAT scan machine, you see, I was strapped in. I mean, they literally duct taped me into that machine. And there was only room for me in Jesus. That was it. And for 45 minutes, I prayed Psalm 91 over myself. And by the time the 45 minutes was over, and they pulled me out of the tunnel, I knew I was going to be okay. I had peace. I knew it was all going to be fine. You see, I had to face my fear. I had to be willing to look at it and say, you are a liar. My God is the one who is true. And it's his words that I am going to listen to. Do I still have fear? Yeah, every once in a while I do. Sometimes I'll have a rough day, or sometimes I'll have a rough few hours. If I'm getting ready to go to a doctor's visit, I think, what are they going to tell me this time? And you know what I do? No. I refuse to listen to the voice of the enemy. I choose only to listen to the words of my God. That's where peace is. You see, he says that if we keep our eyes focused on him, that's where our peace lies. So there is freedom from fear. Is it easy? No. It's a discipline. It's hard. But let me tell you something. When I was first engulfed in fear, and my whole life was fear, every moment was fear, in my dreams and in my waking time. And I began to do this, and I began to just pour the word over me. Eventually I noticed that I actually had moments of peace. And then as I continued to do it, I actually had hours of peace. And then I would go a whole day just feeling the Lord's peace and presence. You see, it's a discipline. It's a practice. We have to embrace God's word. And we have to stop accepting fear like it's a part of us and like it's okay, because it's not okay. It is our enemy. And it is a part of the enemy's plan to destroy you. It is a foreign invader. Don't receive it. Don't accept it. Just receive the words of the Lord and his peace for you.